Hey, hello everyone, and welcome to our, I guess they're now bi-monthly Peplink topical webinar series co-presented by us here at the Mobile Internet Resource Center. I'm Chris Dunphy, one of the co-founders of the Mobile Internet Resource Center. My partner Cherie is behind me right over here in the chat room managing this broadcast. And Erik from Mobile Must-Have. So you want to say hi and introduce yourself, Erik?
Hi, everyone. Erik, founder of MobileMustHave.com here, and enjoying everyone's company and glad to be here as usual for our monthly check-in.
Yeah, we do these sessions. I think we're doing them every other month now, but yeah, we talk about interesting deep dive topics of, usually on the Peplink area, because that's what Mobile Must Have kind of specializes in selling. And at the Mobile Internet Resource Center, we don't sell things, but we provide education and support, and we really work closely with Mobile Must Have. And this is one of the ways that we do it to jointly serve our audience. And these sessions are usually members only as a members only benefit. For this one in particular, we're giving it to our members live, and there's quite a few members tuned in right now, and they'll be able to ask interactive Q&As. But this one will probably be recorded and released to the broader public as a kind of a preview of what our members get access to and the kind of content we create, because this is a refresh of an older popular one. The topic for today is strategies for mobile internet redundancy with Peplink hardware, which is kind of one of the most important topics we talk about at the Mobile Internet Resource Center, and we're going to dive into that. So, Erik, you want to talk about the importance of redundancy, and then I'll repeat basically everything you just said, because that's how important redundancy is, and we're going to demonstrate that.
Yeah, I don't think I could be on this call right now without redundancy. Right now, I'm connected to you via a fairly reliable Starlink. It drops out for about 10 seconds every 2 or 3 minutes, but it's been pretty good. And a cellular connection and a campground Wi-Fi up in this campground that I'm in that's actually performing pretty well because I was the tech that installed it all. So it's good campground Wi-Fi. Not all campground Wi-Fi is great, but I think the number one question that we hear outside of what's the best stuff to buy is, who's the best carrier? Who's the best internet connection? What's the best service? And it's a funny question because we're constantly saying, well, that's highly dependent on where you are, what time it is, how many other people are there, what your budget is. There's all kinds of variables. So what it ends up spiraling into is a conversation about the fact that there is really no single internet provider. If you want to travel around the world and have a great time and stay connected, you need to look at redundancy.
Multiple connections.
Yes, absolutely.
And yeah, the way I like to think of it is like when you're jumping out of an airplane, if getting to the ground is in one piece, intact, is important to you, you really do want a reserve parachute just in case. And even the most reliable connections do have massive outages. It's been in the news just in the past few months that Starlink had a worldwide network outage for hours where, oh, Starlink is gone. People are finding other ways to get online, going onto Facebook and all complaining about, hey, are you on Starlink? No, my Starlink's down. And AT&T has had similar outages. Verizon has had similar outages. T-Mobile has had similar outages. Sometimes the cellular carrier outages are regional. Sometimes it might literally just be the tower that's serving you, because these things need maintenance. And we have been online on a webinar and seen a tech pull up to a truck. We had a great coverage because we could see the cell tower, seen them get out, go up to the cell tower, and turn the tower off because they were about to climb it and didn't want to microwave themselves. And we were very happy that we had connection redundancy. And in that case, that was back in early days, we were able to manually switch to something else. But now with kind of some of the smarter things you can do, you can have it automatically find better connections, and keep you're online. And that's kind of what this webinar today is going to be about. And one of the other, I guess, kind of important reasons to have redundancy is your need. People say, oh, I want to be online, but like, what do you want to do online? Is it upload speed that is important to you? Like, we're doing a broadcast right now. Upload is important. Sometimes download is important if you're doing OS updates. If you're gaming, latency is the most important thing. You want the lowest latency possible connection. And if you're doing like two-way webinars, two-way teaching, two-way health consulting, reliability is important. You do not want to have your voice glitch while you're telling somebody about their tumor treatments or their psychological health or something like that. So depending on what your needs, what combination of connections and how you're combining them could change quite a bit. So having multiple connections gives you so much more flexibility to stay connected in a reliable way. And kind of hinted at, the old school, the basic way of redundancy, the simplistic way, is just having multiple options, having multiple hotspots like this one, and or the campground Wi-Fi and everything else, and you just manually switch between them. But there's some
So
significant
common still.
downsides there.
That's our number one we see with everyone. I call it hotspot roulette. I'm like, are you playing hotspot roulette? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, everywhere you go, you try this one, and then you got to go hop around and change all of your devices to the right Wi-Fi for the right hotspot. And I think one of the things a lot of people are really surprised about when I talk to them is I'm like, well, redundancy is really good. But if you have two wireless hotspots that are broadcasting very close to each other, there's a lot of interference. That's bad redundancy.
Yeah, you could end up interfering with yourself. And particularly, a lot of us have complicated mobile households. And like in our case, we have light switches, and we even had like our scale online. It's like so many devices in a house are online. And your AT&T hotspot's doing awful here. Verizon's great. Well, how many passwords do you have to change? How many connections do you have to change? Where you just say, I'm not going to deal with this. I just get my laptop on and everything else just stays offline. So manual redundancy, if you've got a really simple setup, not a big deal. But if you've got a complicated setup, or if you want to be able to take advantage of multiple connections at a time, that's when a cellular router comes into play, or actually a multi-WAN router. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Is what is WAN first, Erik? You explain that acronym.
An internet connection, I think, is probably the best, simplest way to put it, but wide area network, or the internet, as you put there.
It's the upstream. So LAN is the local area network. That's the downstream from a router, is your local network. That's the stuff under your control. And then WAN is the wide area network. It's everything upstream. And when you have redundant connections, you've got multiple WAN options to choose from. It might be the campground. It might be your one cellular carrier, two cellular carriers, three cellular carriers. It might be Starlink. And the router is kind of the central conductor. And most traditional home routers, most home routers only really have one WAN to deal with. It's your cable company or your DSL company or Starlink. Starlink's router is a single WAN router. But for mobile users who are trying to have some sort of redundancy, having a router that can have multiple WAN sources and use them all at once becomes kind of the what we consider the reason to have a fancier mobile router. It lets you do a lot, and it really lets you take redundancy and reliability to the next level.
That's what started it all for mobile desktop. I'm like, there's got to be a better way. How do I combine all of these connections together and just have one unified dashboard?
Yeah, so the type of different WAN options that a Peplink router or any other multi-WAN router that is acting as a conductor and orchestra can bring together is pretty diverse. You've got the routers that have their own built-in cellular capabilities. I think you've got one sitting right next to you that is a multi-WAN router.
Yep.
And we're connected via one right now. It's just, these ones have multiple.
As an example.
Have built-in cellular modems, so they're kind of a hotspot on steroids, but they have so much more they can do. Some of them have multiple cellular modems, so we're broadcasting via Max BR2 Pro, which has dual 5G on it, so I'm connected to, I think, actually Verizon and Dish Network simultaneously, because Dish Network here in Wilmington is really, really good for some reason. But you have those two different modems, so you have to be on two cellular connections simultaneously. A lot of these routers have Ethernet ports, so that where you can bring in other things coming in over a wired connection, a la Starlink, a la some traditional hotspots actually have Ethernet ports, so you can share your connection over Ethernet if you want to keep using a hotspot and plug it into a router. If you're access to a home internet option, you've got that. Then USB tethering. You want to talk about USB tethering, Erik?
Yeah, so there's you can tether, for example, a cell phone in a lot of situations. Peplink does have some limitations in that they will tether with Android phones, not iPhone yet. It's a request that we're pushing for. Like how do we not tether with iPhone? But the concept is that you can plug a USB cable into your phone and uplink it to a multi-WAN router, and it will basically appear as another modem connection on that device that you can set in different priorities and whatnot. And Peplink sells little puck devices called what are they called? They're called
Max adapters.
Max adapters.
Max adapters.
We just launched a new one today.
Yes.
And those basically are a USB port that plug into a USB port on a router, and it's an additional option.
Yeah, that's a way to bring in another cellular connection. So whether it's an Android phone or a hotspot that supports Ethernet or USB out. Not all Peplink routers have the USB port, but like ones like the affordable B1 Pro does have a USB port and is great for tethering. Another feature that not a lot of routers have, but Peplinks do and other multi-WAN routers do, is using Wi-Fi as WAN. This is using some other upstream Wi-Fi network, typically a campground or marina network, but it could be a coffee shop, it could be your neighbors, it could be the house that you're driveway surfing at, using that Wi-Fi network with the router's upstream connection going to that and then sharing it with all your devices. That way you don't have to have all your devices, particularly things with tiny little radios like phones and stuff, trying to connect to a Wi-Fi network that might be at the other end of the marina or the other end of the campground. Your router does it and adds it as a possible WAN source. And there's actually even one other WAN option that kind of is, I think, unique to Peplink, is a virtual WAN where you can add additional Ethernet ports beyond what's just on the router itself. So I think in our testing, I've had up to 11 WAN connections simultaneously active in our Max BR2 Pro, and if I used more vWAN ports, I could go even further by combining different things. So that's taking redundancy to a kind of a ridiculous extreme, but it's good to know you can do it if you really want to.
Yeah, and one that's maybe worth mentioning, it does fall under Ethernet WAN, but you also, with Peplink devices, can use the WAN port to connect two Peplink devices together using synergy mode.
Yes.
So it's kind of an interesting way to add additional WANs if you were upgrading your Peplink because you wanted the latest 5G or whatnot, and you could still utilize your previous one by connecting them together.
Yeah, so we've got prior articles and webinars on synergy mode, which is actually a feature we kind of suggested and encouraged Peplink pursue, and they did. It was a key feature of their firmware updates last year that lets you really do great things to take your old router when you upgrade to a new one, and your old one just becomes additional WAN sources for your new one, so you've got even more possible cellular connections or Ethernet connections or everything else, which super powerful feature. And these are all these ways to basically bring more and more things into the router, so the router is becoming a juggler, juggling all these different possible WAN connections and supporting all your devices, and you never have to reconfigure your devices. You just manage this all via a control panel on the router. And then so this is kind of the Peplink is, we've covered some of the stuff with the multi-WAN. You've got all this stuff coming together, and then what can you do with it? So let's talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a popular, like, hey, the campground, the internet's kind of slow here. How are you connecting? How are you doing? It's such a common, and I'm like, I don't know. Hold on. Because the router is managing my connections for me, and I'm not actually sure which ones are fast or not. It's just managing it. We'll talk about that next, it looks like.
Yes, yeah. So these are the kind of the different strategies of so you've got all these connections. How do you put them to use? And the simplest one is known as hot failover. So do you want to describe what that is? And we'll do a demo and show it in just a moment.
Yeah, so basically, think about it as like a list of priorities that your connections would be put in. So, hot failover, maybe you have your, I don't know, your cellular connection on Verizon in priority 1 and your smaller gigabyte, backup plan in priority 2. And the concept of the multi-WAN router with hot failover is it's going to check the connection that's in use on a regular basis using what's called a health check. If it cannot go out to the internet and it doesn't receive the information back it's expecting to tell it that it's connected, it's going to go, okay, I think this connection's down. Let me go into priority 2. And that's a failover, a hot failover. It's important to note, though, when you do hot failover, hot meaning automatic, you're going to lose your internet connection for a small period of time because you're changing your IP address. All of your traffic's now routing out another IP. Some pretty cool stuff's been happening with Netflix and other stuff where it will keep streaming and you might not notice that, but usually a Zoom call's going down with hot failover. It might, I've seen them recover, but
there is a glitch with hot failover. It can be a very, very brief glitch with hot failover because that's the whole point. Cold failover is hot means that the secondary connection, is already up and connected and is just in standby mode. Cold failover means that some cellular enabled routers have multiple SIM slots, but only one of them is connected at a time, and so you can have it. Oh, one SIM is not working; it has to go to the second SIM. That requires a full reboot. It's a 2 or 3 minute process, so that would be kind of a cold failover to the secondary SIM. But hot failover means you've got multiple connections; they're all live and active. One is in use, and the next one is standby. The next one is standby. Next one is standby. You have that priority order, and quick little glitch while it happens, but it also can be quite powerful, and a lot of uses, particularly web surfing, you might not even notice it. If you're on interactive video, there might be a hiccup. There might be a call drop. Depending on your VPN software, your VPN might go down if you're working via VPN. But that's why there's more advanced ways to do failover. The next more advanced technique is called load balancing, if you want to describe that.
Yeah, so load balancing would be 2 connections that are actively enabled and both are in the current use priority. Let's call it priority 1. So they're both enabled. And by default with a Peplink device, and I think most multi-WAN routers that have load balancing set up, it's going to essentially try to load balance. I'm going to balance the load of internet connection requests across these 2 connections. So that's a way for you to use the 2 connections simultaneously, but it's important to note that any single piece of traffic or request that you're sending out to the internet is using one or the other connection, not them both at the same time.
Right, and so one or the other, whichever connection you've been assigned to, if that one has a glitch, you will have a glitch. And it can be kind of confusing sometimes because, particularly if you're trying to load balance connections that are not at all equivalent, you might have load balancing a very fast, reliable connection with a very unreliable connection, and you'd be like, half my web pages are fast and reliable, and the other half are having all sorts of issues. What's going on? Well, the router is splitting your traffic, but it can't magically make that unreliable connection reliable, and weird things sometimes happen. Which brings us to kind of the next strategy for using multiple connections. It's kind of load balancing plus some server secret sauce. And Peplink, the technique's called bonding. Peplink's marketing term for their version of it is called speed fusion, and that's where you've got the router splitting your traffic up and then a server bringing it all back together and monitoring things so that it's dynamically adjusting based on the health of each connection and error correcting and everything else, so that glitch is kind of becoming usually, theoretically, technically invisible, and your IP address never changes. So even when there is a glitch, it's very, very minor behind the scenes, and quite powerful. Do you want to talk any more about Speed Fusion before we switch to you screen sharing and showing off?
I think it's confusing for people. They're like, but I'm like, look, we're going to take multiple connections and we're going to run them all through a tunnel to a data center and out to the internet. That's what allows me to use the IP address from the data center. But then I can start messing around with all of your different connections inside of that tunnel. Some can come up, some can go down. You can drag some out of use, some into use, and the tunnel will heal itself back to whatever you've put into it. It's kind of a workaround for you having to have a single IP address to have a consistent, continuous connection with whoever you're talking to out on the internet. And it's a great technology. I can't believe how much they're packing into, these routers that used to be $10,000 when I was in my 20s.
and like the name says, it theoretically can actually do speed fusion. When you're load balancing, any given connection can't be faster than your upstream connections. You can't get extra speed by load balancing other than just by splitting the load across different places. But any given download or upload is kind of capped. With speed fusion, because every connection is spread out across all your possible WAN ports, you definitely get better reliability, and oftentimes you will get at better speeds. The reliability is the focus behind the scenes, but you can often, particularly for uploads, we find we can, get additive uploads. If we're trying to do a big upload, we'll just turn it on and, 1, 2, 3, 4 connections going at once, and suddenly our upload is just flying along. So some great stuff there. And you want to show off the basics of demo time? Let's see if your screen
absolutely.
share
Which
works.
one do we want to start with?
I'll just start with showing off the Peplink dashboard. There we go. Perfect. And you can show how you put things in priority.
There we go. Sorry, I'm trying to drag this window over so I can see it a little bit more. Okay, so let me actually go to a different dashboard right here because I don't want to disconnect this call. So this particular device, I'm going to drag some of these connections that are not in use. So this is a B1 5G. So you see you've got 2 wired WAN ports here. You've got your Wi-Fi as WAN, which is broken up by 2.4 or 5 gigahertz. So you can have multiple connections out to like a campground or marina Wi-Fi. And then included in a Prime Care license for 1 year, you get to unlock a virtual WAN port, which means you'd have another third wired connection. And then you have your embedded cellular here. So in this case, this device is using a cellular and a Wi-Fi as WAN connection together, and they're both sitting in priority 1. So this would be kind of what you would consider a load balanced configuration in its default state. Yeah. If I wanted to drag something else up into that group, I could bring it in. There's no cable connected, but that would be green if there was. Or like we said when we were talking about hot failover, let's say I say, hey, if both of these connections fail, go to this next connection, and that would be how you would do that. You put that into a priority 2.
Yeah, that's something we've noticed some people get very confused about is they put all their connections, they'll stack them. They'll say, hey, cellular is priority 1, WAN 2 is priority 2, Wi-Fi is WAN is priority 3, and it'll let you have as many. Every time you add a new bottom priority level, if you drag like the Wi-Fi is WAN down to priority 3, you will suddenly see a priority 4 become available, and so on. So you can keep adding layers as many as you have. People often get confused. They don't realize that if something is not in priority 1, it's not going to be used at all unless priority 1 goes down. So you can have multiple things at a given level, but they will only be used if everything at a higher level is disconnected or is not passing health check. So like right now, if your cellular connection that you had here went down, the load balancing would no longer be splitting between cellular and Wi-Fi as WAN. It would just be on Wi-Fi as WAN, but your WAN 2 will still not get put to use until both cellular and Wi-Fi and WAN were down. So oftentimes,
they did a good job at trying to. If it's green, it's in use. If it's yellow, it's in standby, and if it's disabled, it's disabled.
and red means the connection is off. So yeah, yellow means it's in hot standby mode. It's connected and ready to jump in. Red means nothing's going to happen when you try to switch to that because it's already down. So yellow is hot standby, and you are kind of showing off the combination of both load balancing and failover here. So that's the important thing is you're not using just one strategy at a time. You can rank your connections and kind of have them working how you want it. And for some people, it might be like, hey, I'm at home. I've got my my cable modem system going here, and I want to have everything go over cable modem until the cable modem goes down because I live in the countryside, and the cable modem goes down for half an hour a day. So that's when I want to fail over to cellular, because my cellular might not be as fast, and in general, but it keeps working even when the trees rustle. So that's the little bit of thinking you try to put in is the failover and load balancing, how you want to stack them, and then you get to speed fusion. If you want to give we've gotten other webinars that go much more in depth about talking about speed fusion and all the different ways you can tweak it, but it is very easy to set up if you want to just show the quick basics of it.
Hop over to the Speed Fusion Connect tab that you see here, and then we would click on this client mode, saying, hey, I'm a client, I want to use Speed Fusion Cloud. Typically, you'd select an automatic location, but you could also select different data centers that are available around the world. This is basically where your traffic's going to route through, and then check this box. That's it. That's going to set up the basic tunnel. From there, on your dashboard, you're going to start to see a bunch of stuff change, and you're going to start to see information down here where you'll start to see a Speed Fusion VPN. I'm connected to my own data center, but you would typically just see a Speed Fusion if you're going to use the one that they provide, which will kind of go through negotiating handshake and then establish a tunnel, which will show up here. Now, it's important to note, though, that that's not actually going to do anything by just turning that on.
Yes, we definitely see people kind of think, I turned on Speed Fusion. Why am I not seeing the benefits? And also the downside. So we do have guys talking about, like, you don't want all your traffic going over Speed Fusion, because it's a service, it's a server. You actually have to pay for the Peplink's version of it. They charge you $40 a terabyte. You get your first terabyte free with most devices, but there's data there, so you don't want to have your Netflix streaming going over that, because Netflix doesn't benefit really from the
it may even not work, because Netflix will go, wait, I think you're routing through a data center in Chicago, but I'm looking at your GPS.
Yes,
like you're not coming from. I don't think you're supposed to be watching this content that's only licensed for the U.S., so you don't usually want to stream through that.
Yes.
But it's essential for this type of Zoom call.
Yes. So what you can do then is configure both by application or by device, or by setting up a second Wi-Fi network name, that traffic on those things will go over your magic Speed Fusion tunnel, and your other traffic is just going however, load balancing and failover. So that's where you.
That's definitely my go-to. Is, hey, once you've set this up here, then you can click here and just say, hey, copy this wireless network that I already have set up. But anyone who connects to this new wireless network will use that Speed Fusion tunnel. And that's just probably the simplest way to get it up and running in under 5 minutes with just a few clicks.
Yes, and you could also, Peplink has got some decent application detection. You could say, choose like, hey, route Zoom via the tunnel, but leave the rest of my traffic not. So Zoom, if you're doing video calls like this and stuff where you really don't want to have any reliability issues, you can have it go out by cloud application and do that, and the other stuff, go out the other ways. If you've got particular devices that you always want to have via the tunnel, there's the route by LAN client there option too. So I
don't think this is going to hurt anything. I'm going to just enable it. So I think we'll be okay, at least just to get that on.
Just so you
I don't want to lose my demo, but just so you can see it. Well, maybe I'll skip playing apply changes until you finish talking about the route by LAN client.
Yeah, it's you should be able to click on it right now, I think, and
they might just say no tunnel available, but this will give you the ability to then say, okay, cool, this client. Let's go ahead and add it. Oh, it did come up. Perfect.
Yeah. And so you can basically add these devices that connect to that particular tunnel, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of power and flexibility. It starts off pretty simple, and you can get fancy by configuring your different devices to go in different ways. Even choosing certain types of configuring the tunnel in different ways. So there is a feature called actually Multi-WAN, which is kind of an advanced thing, but we can show off where you would turn that on really quickly. That is basically designed to, instead of fusing speed, using all these connections to try and get faster and more reliable, it will send all your traffic duplicated out over every one of your WAN connections, and then pay attention to the quickest reply that comes through that, so that you have the lowest possible latency. So there's ways to choose, like, hey, Speed Fusion normally adds to your latency. It's not usually great for gaming, but multi-WAN, by throwing away a lot of extra data on your data plans, can give you the best possible latency across multiple unreliable connections and stuff like that. So pretty powerful stuff there. And what are you showing
absolutely.
off here?
Oh, I didn't know if we were going to go into outbound policy next. I think I remember what we would add in our slides.
You talked. We've got other webinar that goes deeper into outbound policies, because you can do a lot with, like, I have, like, our Apple TV always goes out over first our Dish network plan, because that is unthrottled 4K video. Then it goes down to the next plan, then to the next plan. So you can have interesting things with outbound policies, and you can have outbound policies that define certain things to go out via your tunnel. So if you want to just do a really quick show off adding an outbound policy that goes to a tunnel.
So I'm in this area where Verizon is connected, but the tower is actually experiencing an issue right now where, even though I have 2 signal bars, it will pass almost no data traffic. It's like the tower has a problem. So it's a problem at the tower level. So what happened to me here just before the demo was, it was load balanced, and I wanted to show load balancing, but I couldn't remote into the router because it was trying to use this connection that was very unhealthy. So I quickly just went, how am I going to keep this demo working so everyone can see it? And I'm like, I'll just quickly do a fast outbound policy that forces all traffic to use the Wi-Fi WAN, but my dashboard will still show everything. So in this particular case, I said, make sure the priority of any traffic going anywhere on this device is going to use the Wi-Fi WAN first, and that solved the problem, and the connection kicked right back on. But I think that just sort of highlights just how flexible it is. But in most cases, you could, for example, set up a separate network and say, hey, if anyone's on this network, which you could then apply a Wi-Fi SSID to, I want it to route out this way. You can. There's a ton of different policies here, which we've covered in different webinars, but the idea of doing balancing, enforcing one connection, having a priority-based list, going with least used or lowest latency, or, as you said before, fastest response time. There's different ways that you can configure it to handle that traffic. I've yet to run into something where I can't figure out how to do the traffic that someone's requested, and we get some weird requests.
You can keep things really simple, or you can get very advanced. It's basically kind of so anybody who's just watching this, don't get too overwhelmed, because these are all the optional fun ways to dive in. Or you can just basically say, hey, I want my laptop on the Speed Fusion connection, and I want my
TV.
Xbox and TV to not use it, and I want my work connections to be the most reliable, and the kids' play connections to be less focused on the reliability. Usually Speed Fusion is something we flip on for reliability, and oftentimes we leave it off because it does have all the downsides of being over a VPN, and your location is in the wrong place. So you try to order pizza, the websites think you're in the wrong place. You try to go to certain sites, they have VPN blocks and stuff like that. So that's all the sort of stuff that can happen there that is a negative. One other thing I want to show before we turn off the demo here is, how do you see what that is, the status of your connection, and how the data is flowing over it? It's under the status tab and Speed Fusion VPN. And you can see
this is what I'm operating on right now. I disabled the cellular connections when we noticed that the towers were acting funky. This is the active connection that I'm living with right now. So you can kind of see that I'm balancing across a bit of Wi-Fi and a bit of Starlink to keep this connection going. I can actually troubleshoot and turn on and off connections live on the fly, and then run speed tests across this tunnel if I wanted to see how it's performing. So there's a lot of flexibility. And then here's a nice little statistical graph, which will start to populate in a minute, and actively show you exactly what connection is currently letting this call operate and work right now.
Yeah, and yeah, it's kind of fun to be able to turn off individual connections and see no glitches. It's like I'm turning off cellular, or I'm turning off this, I'm turning off that. If you turn off everything, of course, there's no magic connection. You're going to be like, oh, oops, I should have turned off every connection at once. But you can play around with things to optimize and or just understand and see how things are working. On that initial graph, you'll actually see connections that are experiencing packet loss. You could say, oh, this connection is really struggling behind the scenes. It might be fast, but there's a lot of drops on that connection. And a connection that has a lot of drops, even though SpeedFusion will compensate for it, that connection with a lot of drops might be slowing everything down. So turning it off entirely might speed up your overall capability of being online if you've got enough redundancy to tolerate that, and so on. So it's kind of a quick glance at everything SpeedFusion-y. We got just a few more slides to go before we get to some Q&A time. So if anybody's got questions, to throw in the chat room, or we'll actually be able to call on people and bring them in with video if anybody wants to join us and ask a few questions on this topic. We can do that. But first off, let's quickly mention a few of these techniques and tricks that we were discussing. So outbound policies, I think you showed that off already, the ability to really tweak and customize how traffic is working behind the scenes. Let's see, when video conferencing is one of the most important uses for using SpeedFusion. Load balancing works for a lot of things, but load balancing can give glitches. So having your video conferencing routing over a bonded connection is super useful. WAN smoothing, we didn't show where you turn that on, but it's kind of when you're configuring and creating that initial tunnel, there's a few customization options you could turn on. One of them is WAN smoothing, that instead of combining connections, duplicates your traffic and tries to optimize for lower latency. And then, again, the automatic settings tend to work pretty good, but if you're trying to bond together, whether load balancing or SpeedFusion, bad connections with good connections, the router will do a good job of hiding those bad connections from you, but you can make the router's job easier if you notice that and turn off the bad connections entirely, or just move them to a lower priority. Because when you're using SpeedFusion, it's only using connections that are at the current active priority. So I'll just drag a connection down to priority 2 or priority 3, so it will no longer be a drag on the system if I know I'm in a place where, like Dish is often in places where Dish works, it can work really, really well where there's Dish native coverage. In places where there's not Dish native coverage, it roams and it has high latency, and so that high latency slows down every other connection because the SpeedFusion bond has to kind of, if you're not in WAN smoothing mode, is waiting for the laggard connections to bond them, even though it's fast. So I'll just move Dish down to a lower priority because I've got so much possible redundancy, I can manage it. Any other tips or tricks that you use on the basic side of things here?
On the basic side, we've covered so much in SpeedFusion on our webinar of that. So if you want to dig into how to optimize that and configure it and understand what TCP ramp is and all this other stuff, we've got a section for that. But should I share where to just look at those settings, or we can probably just hop to that webinar?
Yeah, there's links in that will be along with this video and guides, and Cherie's been sharing them all in the chat for people who are following along live to all the different guides that we've got about this. And then, of course, our members, everyone who is watching this live, and anybody who is watching this the recorded version on YouTube, come join us, become a member, because you could then get access to live webinars like this to bring your questions, as well as to our forums, and where you'll be able to interact with the Mobile Internet Resource Center team, and the Mobile Must-Have tech support team actually monitors our forums and provides tech support to our members, whether or not you bought a router from them in the first place. So it's some really great geeky forums to get deeper questions and setup configuration issues answered. So come join us, become a member if you're watching this on the bigger, broader YouTube when we publish it there. Anything else we got to? So yeah, we do. We're kind of wrapping this up.
Yeah, the in-depth, like a big guide that just came up a bunch of times today for some customers that were burning through a bunch of data. They were just watching 4K video and didn't really realize how much that was going to cost them. So, is check out the guides on bandwidth management and monitor, and how you can set up allotments for certain devices to only be able to use certain amounts of bandwidth. You can kind of like force Netflix into 1080p and not burning through your cellular data plan or hitting your Starlink priority cap or whatever it is. So that's a great tip and trick that kind of goes along well with load balancing, because you can do all that fun stuff.
And then the other side of the coin is using the tools in the router to find out which devices are burning through all your data. And oh, hey, the PlayStation woke up in the middle of the night and downloaded a 20 gigabyte game patch. Oh, okay, that's why this particular plan is now past its thresholds for the month. And having those tools to both dig in and understand what's happening on all your different plans and then to manage them, super powerful. But yeah, we have a ton of resources. A lot of them have at least basics available for the general public, but a ton of stuff that is member only as well, with Peplink focused resources with in-depth guides and hands-on reviews, a lot of videos, news articles, the technical support in our forums that we've mentioned. So there's a lot of great stuff there. And let's switch to, it's going to be Q&A times. Okay. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, before we get to any further questions, I'm going to end the recording for people who are going to be watching this on bigger, broader YouTube. So from here on out, this is member only and exclusive. So if you're not a member yet, join us for the next time. And
these videos are brought to you by our premium members, our mobile internet aficionados. They make it possible for us to track this news and create these videos. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, or better yet, consider becoming a member yourself.